Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the desert heat. No sunscreen, no AC, no pity. Just you, the scorching wind, and a bunch of ancient Persians who somehow decided this was the ideal place to build a civilization. You feel the sand already, don't you? It's gritty, warm underfoot, and somehow inside your shoes, even though you're wearing sandals. The horizon wavers in the distance like a shimmering mirage. Somewhere, a goat bleats with that dramatic, existential bleat that only goats seem capable of. And you're about to learn how to survive all of this without breaking a sweat. Well, you probably won't survive this, actually. You're from a time where 23 degrees Celsius is considered too hot to function. But let's pretend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, leave a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is, just so we can all feel a little less alone across these glowing screens. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the wide expanse of the Iranian Plateau, modern Iran, ancient Persia. The sky here feels bigger than the sky back home. It arches high and pale blue over cracked hills and sleepy villages the color of burnt honey. The air hums with heat, but it's a dry heat. Relentless, sure, but oddly manageable if you don't move too fast. And the people here? They've been building homes in this climate for over 7,000 years. You begin to walk, slowly, always slowly, because every extra step in the noonday sun feels like lifting a mountain. The sun presses down like a warm hand against your back. But just as you're about to declare personal defeat and curl up in the shadow of a camel, you're ushered into a small, clay-colored village. At first glance, the buildings seem simple. Low, earthen walls, flat roofs, narrow alleys that twist like lazy rivers. But you start to notice something clever, something quiet. These homes aren't fighting the heat. They've made peace with it. They're shaped by it, like living things that evolved with the climate. The earliest Persians didn't have thermometers or weather apps. What they had was observation and patience. Over centuries, they learned how the wind behaved across the land. They noted where the sun struck hardest, how long it lingered, and where the shade crept when no one was watching. They knew the power of stillness, and they knew that to survive, they had to work with the environment, not against it. Some of these ancient settlements, places like Sialk, Shah-e-Sukhdeh, and later Yazd, had homes built partially below ground, not because it looked cool on real estate flyers, but because it felt cool, literally. Subterranean rooms, sometimes dug into hillsides or carefully lined with mud brick, kept the air temperature surprisingly steady. By morning, the floors felt chilled. By noon, they resisted the worst of the heat. You wouldn't call it luxurious, but you also wouldn't die of heat stroke. And that, in ancient times, was basically luxury. And you notice another thing, the walls. They're thick, sometimes over a meter deep. Not for protection, though that certainly didn't hurt in chaotic times. No, these walls were climate control. Thick adobe or mud brick absorbs heat slowly, like bread baking in an oven, and releases it just as slowly. By the time the outer wall bakes, the inner room is still sipping on last night's cool air. You wouldn't call it luxurious, but you also wouldn't die of heat stroke, and that, in ancient times, was basically luxury. And you notice another thing, the walls. They're thick, sometimes over a meter deep. Not for protection, though that certainly didn't hurt in chaotic times. No, these walls were climate control. Thick adobe or mud brick absorbs heat slowly, like bread baking in an oven, and releases it just as slowly. By the time the outer wall bakes, the inner room is still sipping on last night's cool air. Oh, and doors? Forget big open floor plans. Persian homes liked privacy and small portals. Doorways were often narrow, low, and placed to control the direction of the breeze, like selective vents in a naturally intelligent system. You feel it now, a soft, deliberate gust sneaking through a shaded entry, winding its way past your legs. It's not strong, but it's enough. Enough to make you think, this place might just be smarter than your own modern home. Even the streets themselves play a role. They're not wide boulevards, but tight, twisty paths between homes. At midday, they lie in heavy shadow. The sun rarely hits the bottom of these corridors, and if you follow the right ones, like the locals do, you can get from one end of town to the other without feeling like a roast chicken. Historians still argue whether this layout was more about defense or climate. Did narrow lanes stop invading horsemen, or did they simply stop heat stroke? Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe ancient urban planners were like you, just trying to get through the day without melting into a puddle. And here's something quirky you wouldn't expect: the color of the buildings. Most are the same shade of sandy brown. Not a design trend, but a thermal strategy. Lighter surfaces reflect more sunlight, and local materials like clay and straw just happen to have the perfect tone. Every house becomes a sun-repelling sculpture, blending into the land like it was born there. You walk into one such home, ducking beneath a curved lintel. Inside, it's dim and quiet. The noise from the outside world is muffled by the thick walls and absence of glass windows. There's just an open shaft above, cutting through the ceiling like a lazy telescope aimed at the sky. Light pours in, soft and golden. This is a skylight, yes, but soon, in later centuries, it will evolve into something far more brilliant: a windcatcher. But we're not quite there yet. Right now, we're still marveling at the base design. You run your fingers along the earthen wall. It's rough, cool, and slightly damp in the corners where moisture from last night's air has lingered. You sit down on a clay platform built into the wall, part bench, part bed. Even here, comfort was folded into architecture like a hidden luxury. You notice pottery on the floor, each jar carefully shaded, some half buried. No fridges here, but these pots use the ancient principle of evaporative cooling, just like that old trick with a wet towel and a fan. Water seeps slowly through the unglazed clay, evaporates, and pulls heat with it. Not enough to make ice cream, but enough to keep milk from spoiling. Enough to make you appreciate what cleverness really looks like. You're probably sweating just imagining all this, but remember, these people weren't, or at least not nearly as much as you would be. Their homes felt differently. The air moved differently. This was architecture that listened to nature instead of slapping it in the face with central air. It's quiet now. You lean back against the wall and listen to the hush. Maybe there's a breeze, maybe not, but the room holds coolness like a secret. And you begin to understand why Persian domestic architecture has been studied for centuries, not for its flashiness, but for its gentle genius. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And in this climate, that whisper could save your life. You wake, if you ever fully slept, with a creak in your neck and dust in your hair, the sort of dream nap only desert afternoons can offer. You're still curled on that cool clay bench, inside a home that's as much cave as house. The light has shifted. It's softer now, slanting through the open shaft above like spilled honey. Somewhere, a kettle whistles faintly, and you catch the scent of cardamom and old stories. Now that your body has adjusted, you begin to notice the materials around you: mud brick, clay, straw, and in between the cracks, time itself. This is the Persian answer to heat: khesht, sun-dried mud brick. It's simple, sure, but don't let that fool you. This unassuming material has shaped cities. You reach out, press your palm flat against the nearest wall. It's warm, but not stifling. The sun has touched it all day, yet inside the home, there's still a freshness in the air. The kind of freshness that makes you question your modern life choices. You with your double-glazed windows and your HVAC system that breaks twice every summer. Mud brick is honest. It does what it says on the tin, or in this case, the trough. Builders would mix local soil with water and chopped straw, pour it into wooden molds, then leave the bricks to bake under the sun's lazy wrath. No firing, no fancy tools, just patience, and lots of it. And these bricks weren't stacked randomly. Persian builders knew how to layer them in alternating patterns for strength and insulation. In the most extreme desert towns, places where midday heat could boil your tea without a fire, homes might have triple-thick walls. That's nearly a meter of solid earth between you and sunstroke. Mainstream history books might gloss over this part. They'll talk about empires and kings, about Darius and Xerxes, about wars fought in places with names you can't pronounce at 3 a.m. But the real genius of Persia? It's in the walls, literally. Some cities were even made entirely of mud brick, from the smallest hut to the royal palaces. The ancient city of Bam, yes, that's a real name, was a sprawling fortress of sun-baked bricks. It had watchtowers, stairways, even irrigation systems, all made of compacted earth. When travelers arrived, they often wrote in their journals with disbelief. They build with mud, and it works? Oh, it worked. There's a certain quiet elegance to these homes. No gaudy paint, no excessive ornamentation, just curves and corners shaped by centuries of need. Arched doorways that funnel breeze, thick ceilings that trap the night's chill, niches in the walls for oil lamps or spices or folded fabrics. You can almost imagine the hum of lullabies echoing through them. Historians still argue whether mud brick's popularity was just a matter of availability or a deliberate thermal choice. After all, Iran is rich in stone in many regions. But stone can't breathe. Stone heats fast and cools slow. Mud brick, on the other hand, feels alive. It reacts to the air. It holds moisture like a cactus. And perhaps most importantly, it's fixable. You chip a bit off, slap on more mud. Need a new room? Dig and build with the earth beneath your feet. Want to remodel? Just dissolve the old wall with a splash of water. No sledgehammer required. HGTV would hate it. You walk deeper into the house. The layout is tight, almost maze-like, but deliberate. No sprawling foyers here. Every room is arranged around an internal courtyard, that signature Persian trick to trap shadows and cultivate silence. You'll get to know these courtyards better later. For now, it's enough to notice how each room narrows your senses. The deeper you go, the cooler it feels, like descending layers of sleep. And the ceilings, oh, the ceilings. Some are flat, supported by timber beams and packed with layers of clay and straw insulation. Others rise into gentle vaults, a trick borrowed from earlier Mesopotamian designs and perfected by Persian artisans. These arches weren't just for beauty. They funneled hot air upward, away from your sweating body, and made even the smallest room feel spacious. But let's talk about the real star, plaster. You didn't expect that, did you? In many homes, especially the wealthier ones, the mud brick was coated in layers of lime plaster. Why? It smoothed the surface, made it easier to clean, and most surprisingly, it helped reflect light and keep interiors brighter and cooler. Think of it as ancient interior design meets physics. And if you were really fancy, you'd add a little marble dust or crushed eggshells for shimmer. Because hey, even desert dwellers liked a bit of flair. You pause in a doorway. The threshold is low, you have to duck slightly to pass through. That's intentional too. Smaller doors meant less hot air slipped in and out. It's not about grandeur, it's about managing your microclimate. These homes weren't built to impress neighbors, they were built to survive. And that kind of design has its own quiet dignity. There's a fringe theory that even the shape of Persian villages evolved in response to wind. Some archaeologists believe that rooftops and building angles were placed to guide air currents through narrow streets like invisible rivers. Not proven, but not disproven either. And the best part? If true, it means ancient Persians may have invented the world's first neighborhood-sized air conditioning system, just by getting lost in the wind. And about those rooftops, we'll be sleeping on them later, but for now, just peek upward. Flat, walkable, and often used as extended living space. Laundry drying in the sun, kids playing, old men drinking tea and arguing about camel prices. At night, these roofs became cool sanctuaries under star-heavy skies. No fan needed, just the silence of night and a blanket stitched by someone's grandmother. You sit again. It's hard not to when the architecture itself encourages stillness. You start to understand that these homes were never meant to impress from the outside. Their beauty unfolds as you live in them, as you listen to the rhythm of light and wind. A friend once said, Persian architecture is like tea. It reveals its depth slowly, and only if you're patient. So here you are, in a home made of dust and dreams. It doesn't beep, it doesn't glow, it doesn't need a software update. But it holds the air just right. And tomorrow, it will hold it again. The air hums, but gently, like a forgotten tune caught between sun and silence. You rise again, this time stepping into the heart of the home, the courtyard. It's not flashy, a rectangle of packed earth framed by columns and shadows, but something about it settles your breath. Maybe it's the sky overhead, cut perfectly into a square. Maybe it's the birdsong, weaving between fig leaves and laundry lines. Or maybe it's the way the breeze suddenly finds you here, as if the house itself was guiding it, like a quiet hand on your shoulder. This isn't just a nice place to sip tea. This courtyard is a living machine. In ancient Persia, architects knew something many still forget. Space is a tool. And here, they used it to tame the heat. Look closer. At the base of the courtyard wall, there's a channel. You might think it's a gutter until you realize it's dry, narrow, and leads to a small stone opening at the far edge. This is the Qanat connection. Oh yes, we're going underground now. You kneel, peer down the hole. Cool, earthy air breathes back at you. That's not just a hole in the ground. It's a vent from one of Persia's oldest technologies, the Qanat system, an underground aqueduct that moved water across miles of desert, from mountain springs all the way to thirsty cities. How old is it? Let's put it this way. The oldest functioning Qanats are over 2,500 years old. That's older than Rome, older than concrete, older than your favorite conspiracy theory, and they still work. The brilliance of the Qanat lies in its design. Picture a gently sloping tunnel, dug entirely by hand, moving water across land without a single pump. Gravity does the work. Vertical shafts along the way allow access for cleaning, and, in homes like this, double as air vents. That's right, they weren't just aqueducts, they were air conditioning. As you lean over the shaft, a cool draft brushes your face. That's the Qanat breathing. During the heat of the day, the water below remains cold. That chilled air rises slowly, and if the home is built right, and of course it is, that airflow is drawn upward into the courtyard.
From there, it circulates into each room, dipping under doors, curling around benches, and slipping past your ankles like a polite ghost. Historians still argue whether qanats were originally built for irrigation or climate control. But here's the beautiful truth. They did both. Crops got water, homes got breezes, all without fuel, fans, or monthly utility bills. You walk to the edge of the courtyard and look at the plantings. Nothing extravagant. A small fig tree, some pomegranate, maybe a rose bush if someone was feeling poetic. But their presence matters, not just for shade or scent, but because plants transpire. They release moisture, and that moisture in the enclosed courtyard helps cool the air further.
You run a hand along the garden bed. The soil is moist. Not soggy, not dry, just enough. That's a sign the qanat is feeding this garden, dripping its hidden water under the surface like an ancient ivy. And remember those vents? The vertical shafts that connect the qanat to the courtyard? Some were even built with pottery liners to guide airflow more efficiently. Imagine that! Handcrafted clay tubes guiding cold air into homes, centuries before anyone thought to plug in a Dyson. But it doesn't end there, because the Persians didn't stop at underground cooling. No, they decided to turn the whole house into a lung. You move again, drawn toward a narrow corridor. It's dimmer here, the walls press in. But just before you feel claustrophobic, the passage opens into a shabastan, a deep, sunken room used for sleeping during the hottest months. It's like descending into calm. The floor drops a few feet below ground level. The walls are thicker. The windows, if there are any, are slits. And here, the air is positively chilly. This is where the cool drafts from the qanat vent upwards, slowly pooling like invisible water around your ankles. Fringe historians claim some shabastans were carved directly into the earth, lined with fired brick and coated in lime to reflect light. Others argue they were simply clever basements. But you don't care. All you know is it's deliciously cold here. Cold enough to sleep through even the worst sandstorm heatwave. And as you sit on the smooth stone bench, you realize the beauty of it all. This isn't just one feature, it's a system, an orchestra of earth, water, wind, and light. Every part of the house participates. The courtyard brings the sun in, the qanat brings the water, the vents guide the air, the shabastan catches the cool, and you, lucky you, get to exist in the middle of it. Oh, and just in case you were wondering, yes, sometimes they even added little pools in the courtyard. Reflecting pools, shallow basins designed to catch the light and release humidity. Not for swimming, though who could blame you, but to act as another layer of natural AC. Water evaporates, air cools, your soul exhales. You lie back now in the shabastan and watch dust motes dance in the single shaft of light. Somewhere upstairs, someone stirs a pot. The courtyard wind stirs again. And in this moment, it occurs to you. The Persian home is not built against nature. It is built with it. A choreography of survival and serenity. Not bad for mud, wind, and gravity. You don't wake with a jolt. You drift, slowly, like mist curling off a morning pool. You're still in the Persian home, tucked somewhere between the underground quiet and the sunlit hush above. And now it's time to climb, just a few steps up, barefoot and unhurried, into the room that gives this entire cooling system its elegant name, the Windcatcher, the Badgir. That's what they called it, Windcatcher, a poetic term and yet entirely literal. You squint upward and spot it, a tall chimney-like tower rising from the roof, rectangular like a sentinel,
Except instead of guarding against threats, it welcomes the breeze like a guest of honor. How does it work? Well, it depends on the wind. You step onto the flat roof where it begins, blinking at the light. The wind is subtle today, but steady. That's good. That's the kind of wind the bodgear likes. One side of the tower is open, just a slit, sometimes a full panel, cut to face the prevailing direction. The others? Closed or narrowed. It's not symmetrical. That's the secret. The wind hits the tower, enters through the open face, and dives. Not straight down, but guided by internal partitions, sometimes wood, sometimes stone, like a reverse flute channeling breath into a song. The air drops, passes over or alongside the cool water drawn in from the kanat, and whooshes softly through the house below. The result? A constant, gentle airflow. No fan, no wires, just geometry and wind. You'd think a structure this elegant must have been a royal luxury, but you'd be wrong. The bodgear wasn't only for palaces or wealthy estates. Ordinary homes used them. Even ice houses and public baths had them, cooling the air for everyone. In fact, windcatchers were often communal pride. Cities like Yazd became known for their skyline of these towers, each one catching the desert wind like sails on a sleeping ocean. Historians still argue whether the bodgear originated with the Persians or was borrowed from even earlier civilizations, perhaps the Egyptians or the Mesopotamians. But nowhere did the design evolve with more refinement and love than in Iran.
You sit now beneath the tower's shadow. A small wooden hatch creaks in the breeze. The scent of clay and old cedar fills the air. It's dry, but not parching. And there's a sound, barely audible, like a soft whoosh, the whisper of air being coaxed downward. It's not always just cooling either. The best windcatchers were versatile. In summer, they pulled air down to cool rooms. In winter, they reversed, expelling warm air and circulating fresh oxygen. Some even included clever combinations of hot and cool towers, depending on how the home was used. The builders thought in systems, in seasons, in generations. You shuffle to the edge and gaze out at the city. From here, you can see half a dozen other bodgears, each one shaped slightly differently. Some square, others octagonal. Some tall and slender, others squat and wide. The variety wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional. Each design matched the local wind patterns, humidity, and building orientation. You remember the courtyard below, the fig trees, the trickle of water underground. And now you see how it all connects. The bodgear gathers air, channels it through shadowed shafts, past the moist breath of the kanat, and into the heart of the home. It's not just a feature, it's an invitation, a way to live with the desert instead of against it. Fringe accounts even suggest windcatchers were tuned, as in their wooden slats and internal angles adjusted slightly to catch particular wind harmonics, producing low, soothing hums as air moved through. No one's proven that conclusively, of course, but wouldn't that be something? A house that sings to the breeze? You lie back on a rug someone has laid out across the sun-warmed roof. The sky is endless, pale blue fading into gold. A hawk circles once, then disappears beyond the nearest dome. And then, just as your eyelids start to dip, a memory floats back. An old poem you read once, carved above the entrance of a windcatcher in Yazd. It said, "I do not force the wind, I wait, and it comes to me." You smile. That's the whole philosophy, isn't it? Here in this world, buildings aren't declarations, they're conversations. They don't conquer nature, they coax it, invite it. Trust that wind and water and clay, if aligned just right, will care for you without complaint. The sun is sliding west now. The rooftop breeze cools by a single degree, enough to notice, enough to whisper. Stay a little longer. The breeze continues its quiet performance, slipping down from the bad gear, curling around stairwells and over tile floors, easing the dust of the day into forgotten corners. You stretch, slow and content, and decide to descend again, back into the heart of the Persian home. This time, your bare feet meet polished stone. You're in a hallway now, one that leads to rooms where the real work of daily life takes place. The kitchen, the storage spaces, the washing areas, all arranged like puzzle pieces within the cooling flow of air and shade. And here's where things get delightfully specific. Because while the bad gear and the qanat get most of the historical headlines, Persian homes had dozens of smaller design tricks to stay cool, and they all worked together like members of an extended family. Some were elegant, others were downright sneaky, but each one was a whisper of wisdom passed down through centuries. Let's start with the floors. You notice that the tiles are thick, not just decorative, but functional. Glazed clay, often in pale colors to reflect heat, sometimes even laid in intricate patterns that aren't just pretty, they help control airflow. Hot air swirls differently across tile than it does across wool, and every surface in this home seems to know that. You run your hand along the lower wall, mud brick coated in a smooth lime plaster, cool to the touch. You sit on the built-in bench along one side, a taht, wide enough to recline on, positioned just under a lattice window. The lattice is another subtle genius, mashrabiyah-like wooden screens that let air pass while breaking up the sun. You get light but no glare, breeze but no dust. And the ceilings? High, arched, sometimes domed. Not just for beauty, though that's part of it. No, the shape serves a purpose. Hot air rises, always, and in a domed ceiling, it gathers at the peak, far above your head, while the cooler air pools lower around your body. You exist inside a vertical map of temperature. The higher you look, the hotter it gets. Historians still debate whether these high ceilings were influenced by fire temple architecture or if they evolved independently for climate purposes. Either way, they do their job beautifully. Now you wander into a pantry, one of the cooler rooms in the house, often nestled along the north-facing wall. Why the north? Because it receives the least direct sunlight, of course. Every inch of this place is a lesson in passive design. Clay pots are arranged along the shelves, many of them half buried in earth-lined cubbies. These aren't just for storing flour or lentils, they're part of the cooling system. Large unglazed jars known as zirs or matkas are filled with water, and as the moisture slowly evaporates through their porous surface, it cools the surrounding air. A mini evaporative cooler, no wires required. You pick one up. It's heavier than it looks, sweating slightly, chilled to the touch. You take a sip. Water so cool it might have come from a spring in the mountains. But no ice, no electricity, just clay, water, and physics. This pantry might even have a special niche, the sardab, a cold cellar room built partially below ground. Some homes had staircases leading directly into these stone-lined cool spaces, where meat could be kept longer and fruits lasted days beyond their usual life. The air here is almost damp, in a good way, and the smell is, how do you describe it? Earthy, honest, like patience. And then there's the cooking area itself, which might seem like an odd place to focus on cooling. But here's where it gets clever. Many ancient Persian homes had outdoor or semi-outdoor kitchens, little alcoves sheltered from wind but open to sky. Fires burned low in dome-shaped ovens called tanurs, yes, the ancestor of the tandoor, their heat carefully contained. The smoke, guided by narrow flues and vents that double as airflow pathways. So even the act of cooking helped encourage breeze movement through the rest of the house.
Fringe theorists suggest that some layouts were so optimized that homes essentially inhaled and exhaled air with every breeze and fire cycle, a kind of respiratory rhythm, oven heat pulling air up and out, bodgear wind pulling air in and down. Back in the hallway, you pass a curtain, not a door. Curtains were used often, made of thick woven fabric, sometimes soaked with water during the hottest afternoons. A damp curtain hung in the path of airflow became a rudimentary air chiller. The breeze would pass through it, pick up cool moisture, and continue into the next room carrying that gift with it. You pass through one now. The cloth brushes your cheek, faintly damp, faintly scented with rosewater and thyme. And here's a quieter trick: thick walls. Most Persian homes were made with adobe or mud brick, laid thick and wide. These walls had thermal mass. They absorbed heat during the day, slowly, stubbornly, and released it at night when temperatures dropped. This meant the interior stayed cooler longer during daytime and warmer when the desert chill set in after dark. Historians still argue which regions perfected this balance first. Some say Yazd, others point to Sistan or Khuzestan, but all agree the materials mattered. And still, it wasn't just about fighting the heat. It was about making a home that flowed, where temperature, light, scent, and movement weren't jarring or artificial, but continuous, harmonious. You end up back in the courtyard again. The light has softened. Shadows stretch a little farther now. You notice the windows around the courtyard all have shutters, but not the glass kind. These are wooden, often carved, set deep into thick walls. You can open them in stages, allowing only a slice of air, or open fully to let in the breeze. No double glazing, no insulation panels, just wood and wisdom. And let's not forget color. Pale tones dominate the home: sand, cream, soft turquoise in the tile, bits of green in painted beams. These colors don't just look soothing, they reflect heat. There's a reason you rarely see dark paint in the desert. Everything is designed to echo the environment, not rebel against it. So now, as the sun eases toward the horizon, you sit once again by the qanat vent in the courtyard, eyes half closed, body resting in that sweet zone between warm and cool. You've walked through an ecosystem, not a building. You've wandered a labyrinth of decisions, all made centuries ago by people who understood that the most powerful kind of comfort doesn't need to be loud or fast or modern. It just needs to be quiet, consistent, thoughtful, like the way this home breathes. A soft clink of pottery nudges you back into motion. Evening is settling now, and the air has taken on that special coolness you only find in deserts, an invisible blanket that whispers rather than raps. As you rise, the breeze brushes your cheek again, scented faintly with something herbal, maybe basil, maybe mint, maybe both. You follow the smell. It leads you into another part of the house, this time toward a small, lush garden. And here, in the quiet glow of twilight, you discover one of ancient Persia's most beautiful contradictions: a garden in the desert, a place designed not just to cool the body, but to refresh the spirit. This is the bog, a traditional Persian garden, and it's much more than just a pretty spot to rest your feet. To you, it might look like a hidden courtyard with trees and flowers, but in ancient times, it was seen as a reflection of paradise, literally. A version of the divine described in ancient Zoroastrian texts and echoed centuries later in Islamic tradition. Water, shade, symmetry, each element chosen not just for pleasure, but for meaning. You step through a low arch and into the hush. Immediately, the temperature drops. It's subtle but unmistakable. The walls around you rise tall, protecting the garden from wind and sun. The layout is deliberate, divided into quadrants by narrow water channels called rills or jewi. These gentle streams run over smooth stone, shallow enough to dip your toes into, yet fast enough to trickle with sound. The layout? That's the Chahar Bar design, literally 4 gardens, a cross-shaped layout that mirrors the 4 rivers of paradise. And at the center, where the water channels meet, is often a pool or small fountain. You crouch beside one now. The water is moving softly. It reflects the sky like a polished piece of silver, only interrupted when a single leaf drifts down from the pomegranate tree above. Yes, pomegranates, one of the garden's sacred fruits, alongside fig trees, date palms, citrus shrubs, and sweet herbs planted in tidy rows. But this isn't a wild jungle. The bog is about order, harmony. Even in its most abundant state, it feels designed. Symmetrical walkways, tiered platforms, every turn offering a new axis of beauty. The walls around it aren't meant to keep people out, they're meant to keep the cool in. And of course, here too, the bodgir plays its part. The taller towers are often positioned near the garden's edge, drawing air down through carefully angled ducts and releasing it across the water surfaces. As the air skims over pools and through shaded leaves, it picks up moisture, cools further, and swirls into adjacent rooms, often the summer living quarters, which face directly onto the garden.
Historians still argue whether these garden designs were purely functional at first, or if the spiritual symbolism evolved alongside their practicality. Either way, you sit now in the result, a desert cooling machine disguised as a dreamscape. Even the plants play their role. The cypress tree, tall and thin, casts long, narrow shadows and allows for airflow beneath its branches. The sycamore, broader, offers shade at the hottest parts of the day. Low-growing mint and basil release their scent when brushed, a sensory gift every time you walk past. And then there's the sound. In a modern home, silence can be eerie, but in the Persian garden, it's a layered quiet. You hear water trickling, leaves rustling, the occasional flutter of a bird nesting in the vine-covered wall. It's never loud, but it's never truly still either. It's a soundscape made for the nervous system. You lie down on a platform near the pool, shaded by a trellis laced with grapevines. The roof filters light like stained glass. Somewhere nearby, you hear the soft crack of a pistachio shell opening. Perhaps a family is having tea on the other side of the wall, or a child is sneaking a snack. That's the other thing. The garden isn't separate from the home. It is the home in a sense. It's where you receive guests in summer, where you host poetry readings, where you nap during siesta hours, or cool off after a bath. And speaking of baths, you rise and follow the narrow path that leads to a small side structure, a domed space, round and quiet. This is the hammam, a private bath, and another place where water, stone, and airflow come together to soften the heat. Inside, the floor is warm, not hot, just gently heated from below by a fire channel known as a garmkhane. You sit on a stone bench, and someone pours water over your shoulders from a copper bowl. The steam rises, not cloying, not overwhelming, just enough to open your skin, to coax a breath deeper into your lungs. In public bathhouses, this would be a social affair, scrubbing, gossiping, tea drinking. But in a home like this, it's quieter, almost meditative. You let your muscles unclench, let your mind drift. Fringe historians suggest that the architecture of the hammam influenced later domed religious spaces, not the other way around. That these rounded, echoing, almost womb-like rooms taught architects how humans responded to light and shape and sound. And whether or not that's true, there's no denying the effect. You feel reset, grounded, not just clean, but cooled from the inside out. You leave the bathhouse, water still clinging to your skin, and return once more to the garden. You've been looping all day, and yet every return feels fresh, like a circle you're meant to follow. This time, you notice the carpet runners along the stone paths.
Not just for comfort, they're often soaked in the afternoon with water from the fountain. As they dry, they release a gentle coolness underfoot. Even the clothes worn in these homes reflect the same logic. Loose, breathable, pale-colored, layers that trap cool air close to the skin. And just like the house, the garden, the bath, they're part of the system. Everything here is part of the system. As dusk turns to night, a new sound joins the garden's music: frogs. You hadn't noticed them earlier, but they've emerged now, chirping softly from the pond's edge. That means the ecosystem is thriving. Water, shade, air, life. You settle back on the cushion, tilt your head toward the night sky, and listen. The stars above are so bright, they shimmer through the trellis gaps. You breathe in the scent of the vines. You let your body rest. This isn't just clever design. This is devotion to comfort, to balance, to living in rhythm with the land instead of against it. And as the breeze returns, you can almost hear the house exhale with you.
The moon hangs low now, like a bronze coin balanced on the edge of the sky. Shadows lengthen, deepen, soften, sliding over the garden, the courtyard, the domed rooftops like silk. You rise again, barefoot and half dreaming, and step back into the house. But now your attention shifts upward. Not just to the ceilings, though those are worth admiring, wooden beams interlaced with lattice, sometimes painted in deep lapis and gold, but higher, all the way up, toward the Windcatchers once more. You've seen their effect from below, the cool air, the hush, the way a room seems to breathe. But now it's time to follow the air itself, to climb. You make your way through a narrow staircase tucked behind a storage alcove. Each step rises in a spiral, close and slightly uneven, clearly built more for maintenance than for grand arrivals. A clay oil lamp flickers in a recessed wall niche. The stone under your hand is warm from the day, but losing its heat fast. You ascend. And when you reach the top, you step into a chamber unlike any other in the house. It's not quite a room, more like a tall, hollow shaft with narrow slits facing each direction: north, south, east, and west. This is the core of the Bodgir. The wind is here. You feel it before you hear it, a brush against your cheek, cool and sudden. It flows through the tower like a whisper with purpose. Not violent, not chaotic, just present, intentional. You look up, and you can see the openings, sometimes one, sometimes more, depending on the tower's design. In multi-directional towers, they're angled like the sails of a ship, adjusted to catch the prevailing winds no matter the season. Some towers even feature dampened cloths or ceramic jugs of water at the base, used to cool the air further as it descends. Others include vertical shafts to direct hot air upward, using the simple principle of convection. And while it seems effortless now, each Bodgir is the product of generations of testing, observing, refining. Historians still debate whether these towers originated in Persia or borrowed from earlier Mesopotamian structures. What's clear is that by the 10th century, they were widespread across the Persian plateau, particularly in cities like Yazd and Kashan, where summer temperatures easily soared about 40 degrees Celsius. But the engineering was never one size fits all. In humid coastal areas near the Persian Gulf, the Windcatchers were designed differently: broader mouths, shorter stacks, paired with courtyards and thick-walled cellars to trap cooler, denser air. Inland, where the air was drier, the towers were taller and narrower, maximizing draft speed. You lean close to one of the slits, placing your hand along its inner wall. The plaster is smooth. Somewhere nearby, a wooden brace creaks as the wind shifts direction. A slow, creaking groan that feels like a ship turning at sea. Imagine the conversations that happened here centuries ago.
Not lofty philosophical debates, but practical ones. Should we build the tower facing north this time? Do you think the new clay from the quarry holds up better in wind? Is it true that Sideg's cousin added a second shaft and cooled a whole basement? These were engineers, yes, but also potters, masons, housewives, herbalists, people who lived by what they built. You sit for a moment near the mouth of the tower, letting the air wrap around you. It's cooler than below, but not cold, just clean, clear. If you've ever slept in a tent with the flaps open on a mountain night, it's something like that, crisp without being cruel. You notice something else too, how quiet the city feels from up here. At street level, Yazd or Shiraz or Isfahan might buzz with merchants and tea sellers and the clatter of donkey carts. But up here, above the din, it's another world. The stars feel closer. The silence feels ancient. And then, because this is ancient Persia and they didn't do anything halfway, you spot another feature tucked into the tower wall, a system of pulleys. Ropes still hang, stiffened from age. These may have been used to hang wet cloths in the airflow, adding even more moisture to the incoming breeze. You remember the feeling back in the courtyard, the way the air seemed to soften around your skin. This was where it began. What's especially astonishing is that these systems were fully passive. No electricity, no motors, just gravity, pressure, geometry, and a deep understanding of the land's rhythms. Some windcatchers were connected to underground water channels, qanats, that ran for kilometers beneath the earth, drawing snowmelt from distant mountains. As the wind passed over the cold water in subterranean chambers, it cooled further before rising into living spaces. Others worked in reverse. Hot air would rise through the tower and escape, creating suction that pulled in cooler air from shaded courtyards. Some towers were even designed with shutters, adjusted seasonally to control airspeed and temperature. There's no app for this, no thermostat, just design and patience. And, true to Persian fashion, even the towers were beautiful. Carved finials, geometric plasterwork. Some were painted, others glinted in the sun with embedded tiles. To the eye of a visitor, they might look like temple spires, but to those who lived here, they were lifelines, skyward lungs for desert homes. You reach out and touch the tower's inner wall again, running your fingers over the surface. There's a faint groove where countless other hands have touched over centuries, repairing, inspecting, maybe just admiring. And as the wind shifts slightly, you feel it again. That gentle, enveloping breath, a sigh through clay lungs. Now imagine this multiplied across a skyline. Dozens, maybe hundreds of these towers punctuating the rooftops. In places like Yazd, the horizon once looked like a forest of sails or slender chimneys. Even today, some remain, creaking softly in the night. You turn to descend again. The stairs feel steeper now, though that might just be the sleep settling into your bones. You make your way down carefully, trailing a hand along the wall, and step once more into the heart of the house. The air feels even cooler here now, like the house has taken a breath and is exhaling it just for you. You pass a painted door frame, brush against a woven wall hanging, duck beneath a lintel beam. Everywhere, the architecture feels alive, like it's listening to you walk. And by the time you curl up again in your sleeping alcove, thin mattress, soft light, the scent of jasmine, you realize something simple. The wind is still moving. Even now, even here, it reaches you. A gift from above.
You sleep a little. Or maybe you don't. It's hard to say. Time drifts in these houses, especially in the hours before dawn, when the walls release their stored warmth and the sky begins to change its mind about being night. You rise again, not because you must, but because something about the house seems to invite movement, as if it's gently nudging you to see one more thing, feel one more cool breeze, hear one more creak in the plaster. This time, you move toward the outer edge of the home, past the main rooms and through a small arched hallway that leads toward a second structure, lower, humbler, but no less thoughtfully built. This is the Ab-Anbar, the traditional Persian cistern. Picture a giant domed belly hidden beneath the earth, filled with water so clear and cold it feels like it belongs to another season entirely. Water drawn by hand or by rope, or by a clever system of gravity-fed channels known as qanats, dug for miles through bone-dry earth. The idea was simple: store cold water underground, out of the sun, and keep it cool with thick insulation, and, in some cases, the help of windcatchers directing breezes into the dome to reduce evaporation and lower the temperature. You step inside the cool chamber. The contrast hits you instantly. It's not just cooler, it's quiet, the kind of quiet that hums. The walls here are thick, stone and brick, sometimes coated in a special kind of waterproof mortar known as sarouge, a blend of lime, clay, ash, and egg whites, of all things. Don't think too hard about that one, just know that it worked. You walk toward the edge of the cistern, careful on the damp stone steps. A single lantern burns, hanging by a frayed rope from a nail. The water doesn't move, not a ripple. But when you dip your fingers in, the chill is immediate, as if the mountain itself had reached into your palm. Many Ab-Anbars were equipped with domes not only for architectural flair, but to reduce surface area and limit evaporation. Some even had twin windcatchers specifically designed to create airflow across the water's surface, cooling it and the surrounding chamber simultaneously. And here's the beauty of it. These structures were built not just for the elite, but for everyone. Townspeople could access public cisterns. Travelers could find water even in remote desert villages. The builders knew that survival wasn't optional, it was communal.
Historians still argue whether the pairing of badgers and Ab-Anbars was developed through central planning or just slowly evolved through trial and need. But what's certain is that by the 16th century, the pairing was widespread, across Persia and into surrounding regions. You pause, listening. Somewhere above, the faintest whoosh of wind again, filtered down from the badger into this cavernous stomach of cold. The two systems, wind and water, speaking to each other. You think back to a story a local once told, of a man who could tell the season just by sipping water from the cistern and listening to the echo inside the dome. He'd tilt his head, close his eyes, and whisper, "Late spring." You take one last look at the pool, its surface black and infinite like a forgotten starless sky, then retreat upward. Back into the house, back into the gentle hush of the sleeping chambers. This time, you notice the layout more, the placement of doors and niches, the way windows are staggered to avoid direct sun, the flow of rooms around the central courtyard like petals on a flower. It's not just aesthetics, it's survival, but with flair. Many traditional Persian homes were designed according to principles of zoning. You had biruni, the outer quarters, used for guests and business, and andaruni, the inner quarters, for family and rest. The inner spaces were better insulated, quieter, and had fewer openings. All of this helped keep the cool air in and the noise out. You wander slowly into the andaruni now. You weren't invited, but somehow the house doesn't seem to mind. Here, the architecture gets more intimate. Ceilings drop lower, colors soften. A breeze trickles through a carved screen, mashrabiyya-like lattice that allows airflow while maintaining privacy. And in one corner, something you hadn't noticed before, a small, half-hidden wind tower, shorter than the main one, but functional. Even private quarters had their own mini-systems. It's as if the house itself is exhaling in stages, like a lung with multiple chambers, each one sighing in turn. You lie back now, once more, this time in a small nook near a shuttered window. The breeze finds you again. You wonder how many thousands of breezes have moved through this exact space, touching different skin, different lives. Somewhere far away, a donkey brays. A vendor coughs into the morning light. The city stretches. You realize something simple but beautiful. In these wind-cooled houses, sleep wasn't just a lucky accident. It was designed, built into the architecture, encouraged by airflow, silence, and stone. You remember a fringe theory floated by a rather poetic scholar in the 1950s who suggested that Persian architecture reflected not just a practical need for climate control, but a metaphysical belief that a house should breathe like the human body, that wind, water, and rest were all part of one sacred cycle. Most academics dismissed him, of course, but the idea lingers. You breathe in. The air is soft, filtered, older than electricity, and twice as kind. It brushes past your face like a page turning. The sun is beginning its lazy climb above the desert horizon, though you wouldn't know it from here. Inside this house, in this cleverly shaded, slow-moving world, dawn arrives gently, like a yawn rather than a trumpet. You're still lying near the small window, half asleep, half listening. But now the breeze is shifting, warmer, slightly more insistent. Morning is on its way, and with it the start of another cycle in this house of wind and stone. You rise once again, stretching slowly, and make your way back toward the central courtyard. The light there is different now, golden, filtered through leaves and lattices, catching on the edges of carved stucco and sun-bleached tile. You pass a bowl of dates someone left out the night before. You don't eat one, but you consider it, maybe later. And now it's time to look up again. This time, you want to understand more about what's really happening inside those elegant towers, the badgers. You've felt their effects, the breeze slipping over your skin, the cool hush of night made softer by airflow. But how exactly do these silent, passive machines work? You step beneath the tallest windcatcher in the house and stare up into its shadowed chamber. You can't see the top from here, just angled blades of brick and clay, arranged like the veins of a broken compass. They're designed to trap the faintest breeze, no matter which direction it comes from. The basic idea is simple. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. If there's a breeze outside, the windcatcher funnels it down into the building. If there's no breeze, it can still create airflow by allowing hot air to rise up and escape, drawing cooler air in through lower vents or courtyards. But this system is anything but crude. Some badgers have multiple channels, like a four-sided chimney, with only one or two sides open depending on the wind's direction. Others are capped with dome-like structures to slow the breeze and reduce sand intake. And in cities like Yazd or Kashan, you might find entire streets lined with wind towers, each one tuned to its house's exact position, height, and shade. And here's the clever part. Many badgers were integrated directly into the structure's ventilation and cooling systems. Some were connected to basements or sardabs, where air would pass over pools of cold water before flowing up into the house. Others were designed to interact with the ab-an-bar, sending a cool draft across the water surface before redirecting it into living quarters. You pause, listening again. Still just wind. But now you hear something deeper, like the house thinking to itself.
Historians still debate the origins of these towers. Were they inspired by the domed wind towers of ancient Egypt? Did they evolve independently across desert civilizations? Or were they a uniquely Persian invention, refined over centuries by trial, error, and a deep understanding of local wind patterns? The truth may be all of the above. Cultures often borrow from each other, like neighbors swapping recipes. But the Persians, well, they mastered the technique. You step into the shadow of the wind tower, your back warmed by morning sun, your face cooled by the air trickling down from above. You imagine yourself in the role of a long-ago builder, carefully aligning each brick by hand, consulting wind charts drawn on parchment, or maybe just watching how a feather drifted across the sky. Imagine spending weeks planning a structure that has no moving parts, no fuel, no switches, only geometry and wind. A design that works best when it's left alone. You move to the base of the tower now, peering into its lower vents. They're angled like fish gills, designed to pull in the air but keep rain and debris out. It's clever, but also beautiful in a way only ancient utility can be. A cat appears, curling against one of the lower vents, tail flicking lazily. Smart animal, it knows the breeze is strongest here. You run your hand along the stone, warm but not hot, not yet. And then you think, what did these Windcatchers mean to the people who lived with them every day? They weren't just architectural features, they were symbols. A well-built bajgir was a sign of status, intelligence, and care. In some cities, competitions arose over who had the tallest or most effective tower. Not out of vanity necessarily, but out of respect for craftsmanship. And for the poorer families, even a short windcatcher could mean the difference between a sleepless night and one touched by dreams. You remember an old story from the southern towns of a man who built a windcatcher so perfect, the local imam claimed it brought angels into the room at night. Whether that was theological or just extremely poetic air conditioning remains unclear. More fringe thinkers have offered wilder theories, that some bajgirs were aligned with celestial charts, that they channeled not just air, but something spiritual, that wind was a kind of soul, and the towers were vessels. Nothing proven, of course, but something to ponder, lying awake in a moonlit house, the breeze nudging your thoughts toward odd corners. You step out into the courtyard again, now fully awake. The sun is peeking over the wall, spilling golden ribbons across the tiled floor. But still, the house remains cool. A child runs across a nearby rooftop, chasing a kite shaped like a fish. The windcatchers rise behind him like chimneys of silence. You think, in a world obsessed with devices and fans and filters, there's something deeply soothing about a house that cools itself, expects nothing, and still offers comfort, silently, constantly. One last glance up. The bajgir catches a breeze, and somewhere inside, air flows through clay and darkness and into your lungs. You inhale. It smells like dust and wind and time. You linger in the courtyard a while longer, drawn to the calm hush beneath the tiled archways. The air smells faintly of dried jasmine and baked clay, with a touch of moisture that seems impossible in a place so dry. But then you remember the underground cistern. You descend again. This time not into the main Aban bar, but into a smaller room beneath the kitchen, one lined with stone shelves and cool alcoves. You notice the change in temperature instantly. It's several degrees cooler here, and not just because of the windcatchers. It's the earth itself, embracing the space with its ancient, stable chill. You pause by a narrow vent near the floor. It connects to one of the smaller wind towers above, less grand, but just as deliberate. And here you can feel it working.
The breeze slides past your ankles like a lazy cat. You're beginning to understand. Each part of this house is in conversation with the others. The courtyard, the wind tower, the cistern, the kitchen. They don't exist in isolation. They breathe together. This section of the house would have been reserved for storing food. Dates, yogurt, maybe dried rose petals or pickled vegetables. Everything carefully preserved, everything kept cool by design. You run your fingers along a row of shallow indentations in the wall. Clay jars once rested here, filled with lentils or spice blends or thick tamarind paste. You imagine reaching into one, lifting the lid, and inhaling a perfume of coriander and cinnamon. And just beyond the storage room, a smaller channel trickles water. It's not much, just a whisper of a stream, but it serves a purpose. Many traditional homes like this were connected to underground qanats, those marvels of ancient irrigation. They carried water for miles beneath the desert, using only gravity and slope. Historians still argue whether the qanat system was purely Persian in origin or whether earlier examples from Mesopotamia and Egypt influenced it. Either way, the Persians refined it to an art form. By the 5th century BCE, they'd already established a network of underground channels so complex and efficient that some still function today. You kneel by the water and dip your hand in. It's colder than you expect, startling even. A quiet gift pulled from beneath 1,000 years of soil. There's something deeply poetic about a culture that hides its most precious resource, not in vaults or towers, but in silence below ground. While other civilizations built aqueducts that spanned valleys and boasted of imperial reach, the Persians whispered water into the earth, letting it hum quietly beneath their feet. And here's where things get weird, in the best way. Some ancient engineers believed these systems had a kind of consciousness, that the slope of a qanat wasn't just a measurement, but a promise. There were rituals before digging, prayers, star charts, even the consultation of dreams. A man in a village near Yazd once claimed that his father could smell water underground, not scientifically, but intuitively. Maybe it's nonsense. Or maybe intuition is just science that hasn't had its coffee yet. You sit there for a moment, listening. The wind from the tower above, the trickle of water, the faintest rustle of a lizard in the stonework. It's a full soundscape, more calming than any white noise app ever invented.
Somewhere above, someone moves in the kitchen, preparing tea, perhaps. The house is waking, but you remain in this pocket of stone and wind and water. And then you notice something else, tiny channels carved into the floor, guiding water between rooms. These aren't for waste or runoff, they're part of the cooling system. During hotter months, a servant might pour a small amount of water into these shallow grooves, letting evaporation work its quiet magic. It's all part of a larger idea. Passive climate design, a fancy modern term for something Persians were already experts in by the time Plato was still sharpening his metaphors. They didn't wait for air conditioners, they built homes that didn't need them. Thick earthen walls, high ceilings, narrow corridors to create wind tunnels, shaded courtyards, reflective white plaster, all meticulously calculated to fight heat without fighting nature. And now here you are, benefiting from it all, lounging like some spoiled time traveler in an ancient HVAC dreamscape. As you rise to your feet, the air shifts again, cool, then cooler still. The Windcatchers are adjusting, catching a stronger morning breeze. You feel it before you hear it, a subtle pressure change, like the house is taking a deeper breath. You smile. This place is alive. And it's not just you saying that. There's a famous poem by the 12th century Persian mystic Attar, in which he describes a windcatcher as a sky throat, open to divine breath. He wasn't trying to be poetic, he was being literal.
Back in the courtyard, you notice how every surface, brick, tile, wood, has aged into softness. Nothing harsh remains. Even the sun, filtered through grapevines and wind-shaped latticework, feels less aggressive than it should. You pass an elderly woman sweeping dust from the steps. She hums softly, a tune without melody. The wind picks up a strand of her song and carries it toward you, then away, then back again, a duet with the air. She sees you, nods, continues sweeping. And you realize something. This house doesn't just cool people, it calms them. The slow movement of air, the careful silence, the muffled echo of footsteps, it all conspires to slow the pulse, quiet the thoughts, and wrap you in a dreamscape where even history forgets to rush. There's a reason modern architects have started revisiting these old techniques, not just for nostalgia, but for survival. In a warming world, passive cooling might be the only sane way forward. But here, in this ancient house, none of that feels urgent. The systems work not because they must, but because they always have. You sit on a cushion beside the wall, letting the air move around you like a tide. Your thoughts drift to knots and skythroats, to clay jars and chill stones, to builders who understood wind better than most meteorologists. And maybe you doze again, or maybe you just close your eyes and listen.
You wake, or maybe you never really fell asleep, to the soft creak of a wooden door shifting nearby. The light has changed again, warmer now, angled. The day is moving, but slowly, as if reluctant to leave the gentleness of morning behind. You stretch your legs, brushing your fingertips along the sun-warmed plaster of the wall beside you. The texture is rough but comforting, like the hide of a creature too old to be startled. Standing now, you drift into a narrow hallway where the Windcatcher's cool breath still trails faintly, but another scent greets you, cardamom, and something citrusy, dried lime, maybe saffron? You follow your nose. The kitchen in this house is not like modern kitchens. No humming refrigerator, no blinking microwave. Just shelves upon shelves of copper pots, clay bowls, and fragrant sacks of dried herbs. The fire has long since burned to coals, but someone's been busy. A bowl of falude sits cooling in a corner, nestled into a basin of cold water, a clever trick. The ancient Persians didn't just master air, they were also experts in manipulating temperature through water, ice, and shade. Falude, if you've never had it, is an early kind of sorbet made from rice noodles, rosewater, and semi-frozen syrup. Yes, noodles in a dessert. Don't question it, it works. You may not realize it, but the technology required to keep that bowl of falude cold in the summer heat is among the most remarkable parts of this house. You're standing near the edge of what would once have been a yakhchal, an ancient Persian ice house. Yes, ice, in the desert, on purpose. It sounds like the start of a bad joke. So, an empire builds a giant mud dome in the middle of the desert to store ice all summer? But it's no joke. These ice houses, often bulbous, dome-shaped structures, were engineering masterpieces. Inside, they stayed cold for months. Some were 60 feet deep, with walls made from a special water-resistant mortar of clay, ash, and goat hair. And how did they get the ice? They made it. In winter, water was poured into shallow pools outside the yakhchal, then harvested before dawn. Night by night, the blocks were collected and stacked inside the dome, layered with straw for insulation. You picture it, a moonlit crew of workers sliding silent blocks of ice into a dome while jackals bark on the edge of the city. The stars wheeling above, the air so dry it seems to shatter instead of hum. Historians still debate whether the yakhchal was used more for storing food or simply to display imperial might. After all, there's no more luxurious way to show power than offering cold drinks in July. But in homes like this, slightly humbler but still proud, ice was less about status and more about balance. The coolness of a sweet treat, the chill of a clay jug,
the softness of an evening breeze, all joined together to shape daily life.
You wander outside the kitchen and into a small, shaded chamber where wide, shallow dishes are arrayed beneath a lattice roof. This is where fruit would be dried. Apricots, mulberries, even rose hips. Some families lined their floors with lemon slices, letting the sun do the work, then packing them away in fabric bundles for winter stews. This isn't survival. It's art. Even now, you feel your stomach rumble gently. Maybe it's the thought of apricots. Maybe it's the falude. Or maybe it's that warm kitchen smell, cooked rice, toasted sesame, a memory you didn't know you had. And while your brain floats somewhere between breakfast and ancient thermodynamics, a story returns to you, one you heard once, years ago. A wandering merchant from Anatolia visited a Persian city in high summer. The locals offered him a chilled drink, thick with syrup and perfumed with basil. He assumed it was a miracle. "Did you harvest the drink from a mountain spring?" he asked. They laughed. "No," they said, "we keep winter in our backyard." He never forgot it, and neither did the poet who overheard and scribbled it into a love ballad. Because of course they did. Persians have a way of turning even architectural flexing into poetry. You smile at that. Back inside, you notice how the rooms are organized not by category, bedroom, kitchen, living room, but by sun and wind. The warmest rooms are for winter, the coolest ones for summer. Thick carpets for insulation, slatted ceilings to let warm air rise. Nothing is random. The Persian house breathes with the seasons. You just move from lung to lung. There's a certain logic here that feels older than blueprints, a kind of respect for the earth, the elements, and even the inconvenience of temperature. And here's something funny. In the 19th century, a few European travelers touring Iran scoffed at these houses. They called the Windcatchers decorative. They assumed the design was more aesthetic than functional. Fast forward 100 years, and their great-grandchildren are now designing buildings in Dubai that copy these exact principles, right down to the inward-facing courtyards and evaporative cooling channels. Some now call it bioplanematic architecture. Others just call it finally listening. You pass by a set of low wooden benches, once used for summer afternoon naps. They're arranged under a vaulted ceiling where air moves like a tide. One bench still has a folded pillow on it. You press your palm to the cushion. Cool. Somehow, always cool. You imagine lying there after lunch, lulled by the breeze, drowsy from lamb stew and pomegranate seeds. Somewhere a child plays a reed flute. Someone else stirs tea. And the wind moves endlessly through brick and branch and memory. You can almost taste the quiet. A pigeon coos overhead, perched on the lip of a wind tower. You look up and see the sky framed in clay. The windcatcher is doing its job. Again, still, always. You think, I could live here. And not just because of the quiet or the clever air conditioning, but because this place is built with time in mind, not just now, but all of it. Past summers, future winters, generations who've slept under these rafters and will sleep again. This isn't a house. It's a conversation across centuries. And the wind? It's the punctuation. You lean back against the wall, eyes half closed. Let the next breeze pass over your face like a page turning, and you exhale. Still cool, always cool. You shift your weight slightly, still leaning against the sun-warmed wall, but now more curious than drowsy. Your fingers tap lightly against the clay, and you can't help but wonder, who built this? Not just the laborers, but the thinkers, the ones who envisioned how air could move through space like water through channels, silent and invisible. That leads you somewhere unexpected. You find yourself back inside, but now standing beneath a vaulted ceiling lined with small, pointed arches. They stretch above your head like upside-down flower petals. You tilt your face up.
The symmetry is precise, but not sterile. There's a softness to it, as if the geometry was gently nudged into shape rather than forced. And this is where the real journey begins, not through bricks, but through ideas. The Persian mastery of cooling their homes wasn't just a feat of practical engineering, it was also deeply philosophical. A blend of function and cosmic harmony. Yes, really. We're talking about Windcatchers, but also about the Zoroastrian concept of balance between heat and cold, dry and moist, light and dark, between the four elements. It sounds like something from a New Age retreat in Sedona, but this was daily life in Achaemenid-era Persia. The structure of homes, temples, even entire cities often mirrored these principles. You pass through an interior archway and emerge into a domed chamber, a small one, quiet, save for the occasional whisper of air from a hidden vent. Here, an old scholar might have sat, centuries ago, drawing diagrams in the sand with a stick. The circle of the dome above him, the earth below. A diagram not just of airflow, but of existence. Historians still argue whether this mystical alignment of architecture with the cosmos was intentional or simply convenient. But when you stand here, feeling the air spiral gently around you with no fan, no hum, no electricity, it's hard not to believe someone knew exactly what they were doing. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This wind you feel, it's not just air. It's a designed experience. In many Persian homes, especially those of the middle and upper classes, the windcatcher was part of a wider sensory architecture. That meant layering physical comfort with emotional and even spiritual ease. The breeze from the badgir might pass over a water basin first, carrying moisture. Or it might move through a scented corridor lined with dried herbs, mint, basil, thyme, before reaching you. Imagine your modern air conditioner spritzing lavender and mint while maintaining 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll start to understand just how luxurious this was, minus the energy bill. And speaking of bills, this ancient cooling system was free. Once built, the Windcatcher didn't require fuel or maintenance beyond the occasional cleaning. Unlike Roman hypocausts, which required constant tending and wood-burning fires, or modern fans churning electricity, the badgir simply caught the wind and shared it. You pause at another doorway. It's framed with delicate tile work, deep blues, cracked but proud. The room beyond is darker, with thick rugs and low ceilings. This would have been the winter chamber, used when warmth was the goal. So now your mind starts to reverse the equation. How did these homes handle cold? Turns out, Persian architects didn't just design for heat, they designed for flexibility.
Homes were seasonal instruments. Warm air from the sun would be trapped in sunken courtyards. Heavy curtains could be drawn over doors to insulate. And the walls themselves, thick, dense, sometimes made of chesht, mud bricks, could retain heat through the night. It was passive solar heating before passive solar heating had a name. Back to summer. You trace your steps past the Windcatcher shaft. Now you're noticing its placement relative to every room. Not centered, not symmetrical, but purposeful. Rooms were placed and sized based on how wind would flow. Bedrooms got the most direct breeze. Kitchens were placed where heat would dissipate. Storage rooms sat deeper, where temperatures remained stable. It's like walking through a machine designed not to buzz or beep, but to breathe. And while we're talking breathing, let's pause on something truly fringe. Some Persian physicians in the early Islamic period believed that air quality within homes influenced the humors of the body. Not exactly germ theory, but close. They argued that air passing over certain herbs or cool surfaces calmed the bile. A draft through rose petals might soothe the heart. A room perfumed with cedarwood might protect the lungs. Is it science? Not by today's standards, but you still feel better in a room with good airflow and a pleasant scent, don't you? Maybe they weren't that far off.
Let's spiral back to technology. One of the lesser-known innovations tied to these windcatchers was their integration with qanats, those ancient underground aqueducts we passed earlier. In some cities, the bajgirs weren't just catching air, they were creating a pressure gradient that drew cool air up from qanats, circulating it into the house. It's the architectural equivalent of pulling a summer breeze from a secret cave. And yet, this isn't something people bragged about in old manuscripts. No royal decree shouts, "We are the masters of passive cooling." It was just part of life, commonplace, expected, which is probably why it took the rest of the world so long to notice. And still, people are discovering the science behind these structures. In 2020, a group of Iranian and German researchers digitally modeled a windcatcher connected to a qanat. They found that, depending on dimensions and soil type, the temperature could drop by 15 degrees Celsius, enough to keep perishable foods safe without any refrigeration. 15 degrees, without moving parts, in the desert. Your modern air conditioner suddenly seems a bit loud. As you walk slowly through another corridor, your fingers trail the wall again. It's cooler than your skin. Somewhere above, wind swirls through the tower, a sound like a cat sighing through paper. You're not sure if you want to fall asleep or solve physics equations. And that's the beauty of it. This house doesn't force either. It just makes room. In modern cities, we talk about sustainability. In ancient Persia, it wasn't a buzzword. It was a habit. You design for the environment you live in. You harmonize with wind, not fight it. You build thick walls because summer always comes. You face your windows away from the sun. You plant trees not for beauty, but for shade and moisture retention. Maybe the real secret of these ancient homes isn't their cleverness, but their humility. They didn't aim to conquer nature, they aimed to listen to it. And as you lean into another breeze purling from the wall, you hear the message again. Cool, still, simple, balanced. The wind moves on, and so do you.
You ease through a shaded doorway, and this time there's a noticeable hush. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the hush of intention, like stepping into a room designed specifically for pause. You blink in the filtered light. The space opens up into a tall, circular chamber, at the center of which rises a narrow column of air, invisible yet unmistakable. You've entered the heart of the system. This is where the windcatcher breathes deepest, where pressure differentials hum quietly through brick, and hot air is drawn up and away like steam from a teacup. It's not flashy. There are no levers or pulleys, just geometry and gravity and wind. And here's the twist you didn't expect. In some of the oldest Persian cities, like Yazd, this quiet airflow center wasn't just part of the home, it was sometimes part of the mosque. Yes, in certain architectural periods, windcatchers were integrated into sacred spaces, not only to cool the congregants, but to create a kind of spiritual ventilation, a literal cleansing of the air. As one dusty inscription allegedly suggested, the breath that rises here should carry prayer, not sweat. Okay, possibly apocryphal, but charming, no? You find a cushion against the wall and sink down. The floor beneath you is cool, smooth stone. Someone, centuries ago, carved a shallow basin here, not for drinking, but for stilling. A place where water could sit and mirror the shaft above, catching sky and air in a perfect loop. It's a moment of architectural poetry, but also, as usual, a practical hack. That pool, it helped trap dust. As the wind passed over the surface, heavy particles dropped and stayed behind. The cooled, cleaner air rose, swirling more gently into the rooms above. Now, let's talk about how people used these spaces. Not just what the rooms did, but how humans behaved inside them. In wealthier homes, the Windcatcher's central column might connect to multiple floors, drawing air through different levels. In the summer, families would often sleep in the basement, where airflow was strongest and temperatures most stable. Yes, you, your 21st century self, would be hauling a pillow down a flight of stone stairs with your cousins, probably stepping over a goat or two, to fall asleep in a dry, earth-cooled room. The night air scented faintly with clay and crushed thyme, drifting in through a low vent. It sounds lovely, doesn't it? And there was a rhythm to it. At certain hours, when the wind shifted, someone in the household might climb onto the roof and adjust a flap or close a wooden slat in the bad gear. These weren't mechanical parts, but subtle, human-operated tweaks, like tuning an instrument to catch the right note. And catch it they did. A well-built windcatcher didn't just blow air. It whispered. It massaged. It moved with purpose. You didn't feel a gust. You felt a suggestion. Now, don't be fooled into thinking these systems were reserved for palaces. In smaller, humbler homes, even a partial bad gear, built from reused materials and shared walls, could make a significant difference. Some neighborhoods even had shared windcatchers, built taller and broader, with channels branching like veins into multiple dwellings. Imagine a whole block cooled by a single tower, like ancient air conditioning cooperatives. And the best part? No HOA fees.
Of course, not everyone was satisfied with airflow alone. In more elaborate homes, windcatchers were paired with other tricks. Underground chambers filled with ice brought from mountains, evaporative fountains nestled in inner courtyards, narrow alleys positioned for maximum shade. And then there were the rooftops. In Yazd and Kerman, flat roofs became part of the cooling strategy. At night, residents would often sleep on them, under the stars, cooled by the very same wind the bad gears harnessed. Think of it as a balcony, a bedroom, and an astronomy lab rolled into one. You can picture it, can't you? You, stretched out on a woven mat, the stars above you like a slow-burning chandelier, a soft breeze playing along your collarbone, maybe someone nearby humming a song older than memory. Historians still debate whether these rooftop rituals were born from necessity or pleasure, but most agree the lines blurred. People adapted not just their buildings, but their behaviors to the rhythms of the environment. And that's what makes these systems so quietly radical. They weren't just passive, they were participatory. Living in a home with a windcatcher meant tuning in, listening to the weather, sensing the angle of the sun, noticing how shadows shifted at noon. It meant adjusting your routines, napping during peak heat, opening windows only after sundown, cooking in cooler rooms. You became, in essence, part of the machine, a breathing, sweating, sleeping component of an organic, living house. Let's not forget the builders, the artisans and craftsmen who shaped these towers. Many were trained in techniques passed down orally, through guilds and family lines. There's a saying, possibly embroidered by romantic historians, that a good windcatcher maker could feel a breeze in his bones before it turned the trees. Poetic? Sure, but there's truth in it. These builders understood the subtleties of direction. They could measure wind speed with a string and a feather. They chose materials that retained just enough heat to avoid overcooling at night. They built with fingers, yes, but also with instinct. And in the old cities, that instinct became identity. In Yazd, for example, the skyline itself became dotted with bad gears, tall, square towers rising like periscopes, each slightly different in height, angle, and design. Walking those streets today, you'll still see them, catching not just wind, but history. And now we come to a moment of quiet irony. In the 20th century, as electric air conditioning became more common, these ancient windcatchers were abandoned, even mocked. Some were torn down. Others were sealed off with concrete and duct tape. Progress, they called it. But you're already ahead of the story, aren't you? Because here we are, decades later, rediscovering the genius of those structures, studying them with laser scanners and airflow simulations, trying to replicate their effects without burning fossil fuels. Architects in the Middle East, North Africa, and even California have begun to reintroduce Windcatcher principles into modern design. Some new schools in desert regions are built with tall cooling towers. In Europe, engineers explore ways to retrofit passive ventilation into skyscrapers. And while no one's quite matched the simplicity and elegance of the old Persian badgears, the trend is clear. What once considered backward is now forward-thinking. And you? You're still sitting in the chamber. The Windcatcher hums above you like a sleeping flute. There's no fan, no buzz, no fluorescent sting. Just stone and shadow and breeze. The house doesn't just cool you, it reminds you how to slow down.
The hum of the Windcatcher fades just slightly as you stretch your legs and move into another passageway. You're not rushing now, there's no need. The pace of this house, this whole cooling system, it's unhurried, unfussy, deliberate. And as you wander into the final few corners of this ancient home, you start to see something more than just clever architecture. You start to see a philosophy. Because here's the thing, cooling in ancient Persia wasn't just about escaping the heat. It was about harmony, with nature, with time, even with one another. It's something the old poets hinted at. There's a line from Sadi, the 13th century Persian writer, that goes, "A home is not where the walls hold firm, but where the wind finds rest." Was he talking about Windcatchers? Not directly. But once you've spent time in one, it's hard not to hear a double meaning. You wander now into a quiet gallery lined with alcoves. Inside each one is a fragment of brick, of tile, of bone-dry plaster. This is a kind of Windcatcher museum within the house, built by some future-minded stewards centuries ago. Each piece bears a mark, a notch, a curve that tells a part of the airflow story. Here's a carved wood grill used in a bedroom vent, delicately perforated not just for circulation but for privacy. Over there, a ceramic jar once filled with water, placed at the base of a breeze shaft to cool the air through evaporation. And this? A bundle of faded reeds tied with twine, probably used as a scent diffuser. Historians suspect these were soaked in rosewater or vinegar and placed in breezy corridors to flavor the air. Imagine that, not just cooled air, but perfumed air, a hint of jasmine on a night breeze. You lie back in your mind's eye and let that detail wash over you. Not everything was romantic, of course. Insects were a problem. Windcatchers, being open at the top, had to be carefully designed to minimize pests. Some towers had narrow screens or spiked ridges to discourage birds from nesting inside. Others used hanging fabrics soaked in herbal repellents. In one 15th century letter, a traveling merchant grumbles that a gnat storm descended from the ceiling like prophecy. Charming image, less charming reality. And yet, solutions were found. Because these systems weren't just built once and left alone. They were maintained, adapted, cared for. In fact, part of the household rhythm involved seasonal adjustments. In spring, the flues were cleaned, the channels swept, and any loose bricks reset. Families might even gather to repaint the base of the Windcatcher white to reflect heat and mark the change of season, a little ritual of brightness. It wasn't all technical either. Some towns believed the Windcatchers needed blessings, that airflow, like water, was a kind of spirit, easily disrupted by anger or neglect. In remote villages, elders might whisper small prayers or leave a sprig of mint tucked in a niche near the base, just in case. Historians still argue whether these gestures were religious or cultural, but what's certain is that air held meaning.
You pass into another chamber, this one dimmer, smaller. A side room maybe, or a sleeping nook. The Windcatcher's shaft ends just above it, the breeze still faint, but deliberate. And here, carved into the wall in flowing Persian script, is a poem. Let the sun pass over the roof, not the soul. Let the wind pass through the house, not the heart. You smile. It's melodramatic, yes, but also perfect. Because by now, you're realizing that these buildings weren't just shelters, they were conversations between humans and heat, between wind and wall, between what we build and how we live inside it. You remember that the earliest Windcatchers were experimental, even a little crude. A few stones stacked, a shaft pointed toward whatever direction seemed promising. Over generations, refinement came. Art met engineering. And people didn't just build to survive, they built to be comfortable, to feel at ease in their own skin, in their own climate. Modern scientists have tried to quantify the efficiency of these systems, measuring temperature drops, airflow rates, humidity levels. Some claim a drop of up to 15 degrees Celsius inside a well-designed Windcatcher home on a blazing summer day. But what those numbers miss is the psychological effect, the feeling of entering a shaded courtyard and feeling the breeze lift your sleeve, of lying down at noon and hearing the tower above you whisper, gently, across centuries. It's the ritual of cooling, not just the result, that mattered. And here's one last twist. These designs weren't confined to Persia. Variations of Windcatchers appear in Egypt, where they're called malkaf. In the United Arab Emirates, tall towers known as barjil served a similar purpose. Even in the Horn of Africa, some merchants used split-shaft cooling systems made from woven reed and mud. But Persia's version? It's the one most fully developed, the one that lasted longest, the one that became part of the national architectural identity. In fact, it's so iconic that in 2017, the city of Yazd, home to over 3,000 historic Windcatchers, was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site specifically for preserving this delicate balance of environment and culture. So you see, it's not just about cooling. It's about remembering how much can be done with so little. It's about realizing that the solutions to modern problems might already be hiding in the past, quietly, elegantly, waiting to be noticed again. You run your fingers along the plaster wall. It's slightly rough, sun-warmed, familiar. And the breeze, always the breeze, returns. Maybe a little stronger now, maybe with just a hint of spice in it. Cumin or cinnamon? Someone nearby must be cooking. You hear a quiet clink of pots, the soft shuffle of slippers on tile. The house breathes. And you? You exhale.
You follow that last breeze down a narrow corridor, wider than a passage, but too intimate to be called a hall. The walls curve gently inward as if to guide your steps. The air is cooler here and softer. There's a hush to it, like the house itself is winding down. And, in a way, it is. Because by now, you've seen the full rhythm of this ancient Persian home. You've stood in the courtyard where families gathered under moonlight, their feet bare on cool stone. You've listened to the stories carried by the Windcatcher, stories of invention, of endurance, of careful, quiet brilliance. And now, you're arriving at the final room. It's not grand, no mosaic, no fountain, just a rounded chamber lined with faded cushions and shelves that once held scrolls. A place to think, or not think. Here, you're told, elders would retreat during the peak of summer. They'd sip thin rosewater sherbet, they'd recite poetry, or, more often,
They'd just sit, listening to the wind. One traveler wrote of such a room in the 10th century. He described it as a place where the wind lingers and time forgets itself. Whether or not that's literal, you can feel what he meant. And here's the strangest part. You're comfortable. You, in your modern brain, with your smartphone neurons and thermostat cravings, you feel entirely at home in a system over 2,000 years old. No wires, no switches, just adobe, water, and air. You settle onto a cushion. It sighs beneath you. The breeze brushes your cheek like a parent checking for fever. And the house waits. Because this wasn't just a cooling mechanism, it was a way of living. You adapted your habits to the rhythms of the day. You rose early, slept at noon, gathered at dusk. The wind didn't serve you, you moved with it. That's the trick modern buildings miss. We treat architecture as a barrier, sealed, regulated, sanitized. But the Persians, they treated it like a channel, not to block the world, but to guide it.
Remember the underground qanats you explored earlier? Those channels that fed cool air into homes. Some scholars now argue that the entire layout of certain cities was based on airflow. Not just houses, but streets, markets, mosques, all oriented to catch, split, and distribute the breeze like water. Think about that. A city designed not for traffic, but for wind. It wasn't perfect, of course. Summer still meant sweat. Dust still blew in. But the system reduced suffering in ways that were sustainable and beautiful. There's something else too. As Windcatchers aged, they were repaired by hand. Mortar was patched, bricks replaced. Children learned from grandparents how to climb the towers and clear bird nests. One 12th century manual recommends singing to the wind while working, so it may remember to return. Poetic nonsense? Maybe. But maybe not, because in the end, the success of these systems wasn't just in their design, it was in the culture that supported them. A culture that believed in patience, in craftsmanship, in long thinking. In your world of rapid fixes and fast replacements, that feels oddly comforting, like discovering a lullaby buried in brickwork. You stand slowly, stretch your arms, and walk one final circuit around the room. The breeze moves with you. It always has. Now, as we leave this house behind, let your breath slow down. Let your eyes soften. No need to hold on to any of the details. Not the carved vents, not the angled bricks, not even the jasmine-scented air that drifted through the cooling towers. All of it can simply fade, like the last breeze of evening slipping out across a quiet desert plain. You're not rushing anymore. You're just here, resting in the long shadow of ingenuity, feeling the hush of a culture that mastered the art of subtle comfort long before modern noise took over. There are no glowing screens in this house, no buzzing fans, no humming wires in the walls, just the rhythm of air, of time, of silence. And now, in your own room, wherever you are, in Cairo or Kansas, Tehran or Tokyo, you can bring a little of that quiet with you, the kind that isn't forced, that just happens when we trust the wind to do what it's always done. You don't have to remember any of this, but if a breeze finds your cheek in the middle of the night, and it smells just faintly of stone, mint, or memory, maybe, just maybe, you'll smile in your sleep. And you'll know, somewhere, the Windcatcher is still working.